Episode 1. The First Night at the Cemetery. They said the angel appeared when the last shovelful of dirt fell on the grave. No one saw it arrive. No sound of wings, no burst of light. It was simply there, standing tall, motionless. A figure carved from something that did not look like stone, but did not look alive either. At first, the villagers thought it was a statue, a cruel prank by some mason who wanted to frighten them. But when the moonlight shifted and the shadows changed, the angel's face seemed to follow the grieving family with its eyes. A mother swore she saw its lips move, though no sound came out. Her scream shattered the silence of the cemetery. The priest, trembling with his rosary clutched in his hands, tried to reassure them. "If it is an angel, it is here to bless the dead." Yet even as he spoke, his voice cracked, as though something inside him doubted his own words. Because there was no peace in the presence of that figure, only weight, only dread. That night I stood among the mourners. I felt the ground beneath my feet pulse, as though the grave itself was still breathing. And in the stillness, I heard something faint, a whisper that didn't come from any mouth around me. It came from the grave, or worse, from the angel itself. Children cried, dogs barked and then fell silent, their eyes locked on the figure. A lantern went out with no wind to snuff it. The darkness around us thickened, pressing on our chests, until the only light left was the pale reflection on the angel's face. And then, the miracle, or the curse. The soil covering the grave shifted. Not much, just enough to show that it wasn't resting. The coffin beneath knocked once, twice, like knuckles rapping from inside a door. No one moved. No one dared breathe. We waited for the priest to speak, but he had fallen to his knees, silent, as if his prayers had been stolen from his lips. The angel did not move, it did not blink, but I swear to you its gaze fell upon me, and in that moment I knew two truths. First, the dead were not finished. Second, neither was the angel. I wanted to run, but my legs betrayed me, and then a thought, no, a voice, slipped into my mind. This is only the beginning. Episode 2. The Grave That Never Stays Closed. By dawn, the angel was still there, unmoving, watching. The villagers hoped daylight would strip away the terror of the night, but instead it revealed something worse. The grave had opened. The soil that had been packed down, sealed by ritual and prayer, now sagged inward like a wound that refused to heal. The coffin lid peeked through the dirt, cracked in the middle as though something inside had pushed. Men rushed forward with shovels, muttering that it was the weight of the earth, or moisture, or rot. They refilled the grave, tamped the soil flat, and pressed the wooden cross back into place. But even as they wiped the sweat from their brows, I saw the angel's head tilt ever so slightly, as if amused. That night the grave yawned open again. This time the villagers refused to touch it. They stood in a wide circle, whispering prayers that evaporated in the cold air. Someone dared to light incense, but the smoke drifted sideways and clung to the angel's form, curling around its wings like chains. The priest declared it a test. "The Lord is watching us. We must not falter." His voice was strong, but his hands trembled. I noticed he never once looked directly at the angel. On the third morning, the coffin lay completely exposed. Its lid had splintered, revealing blackness within. Children said they saw hands, pale and twitching, clawing against the wood. Their mothers hushed them, but their eyes betrayed the same fear. I returned that night, though every instinct told me not to. The air smelled of iron, sharp and bitter. The angel towered above the open grave, wings still folded, eyes locked on the emptiness below. I waited, praying for dawn, when suddenly, a sound rose from the coffin. Not a groan, not a cry. It was chanting, low, guttural, impossible to understand. Yet the words slithered into my ears and nested in my skull. The grave had become a mouth, and it was speaking. The villagers fled, leaving their lanterns to die in the dirt. I should have run too, but I stayed, because I felt something pulling me closer. And then I saw it, scratched into the wood of the coffin lid from the inside, fresh and wet. Not dead, waiting. The angel did not stop it, it only watched. And I knew with a certainty that froze my bones that the grave would never stay closed again. Episode 3. The Priest Who Lost His Voice. On the third night, the villagers demanded answers. Fear had turned into anger, and all eyes fell on the priest. If the angel was truly from God, then surely the man of the cloth could command it, or at least explain why the grave would not rest. He agreed, though reluctantly. At dusk, with the sky bruised purple and the cemetery heavy with fog, he stood before the angel. His hands clutched the Bible so tightly the leather bent beneath his fingers. "By the authority of heaven," he began, voice echoing thin but steady. "I call upon you to reveal your purpose. Are you messenger or demon? Protector or curse?" The angel did not move. Its wings remained folded, its head bowed slightly toward the open grave, as if listening to something none of us could hear. The priest raised the Bible higher. "If you are of God, bless this ground. If not," his words cracked. He coughed, clutching his throat. A rasp, then silence. His lips moved, but no sound followed. Not a whisper, not a breath of prayer. His voice had been stolen in an instant, snatched from his lungs as though the very act of questioning the angel carried a price. Panic spread like fire. Some villagers shouted that he had sinned, that he had spoken too boldly. Others swore the angel had cursed him. But I watched closely, and I saw the truth. The angel's head had tilted, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging a bargain completed. The priest fell to his knees, clawing at his throat. His eyes begged for help, but no help came. His wife ran to him, tears streaking her face. But the moment her hands touched him, her mouth too fell silent, locked in voiceless horror. She screamed without sound. One by one, others tried to pray aloud, but the words curdled into nothing. The cemetery grew quieter and quieter, until the only sound was the faint, steady chant leaking from the grave itself. That night, not a single voice was heard in the village. Children cried without sound. Dogs barked with no echo. Even the wind seemed muted, as though creation itself had been hushed. And yet, in that dreadful silence, I heard something no one else did. A whisper curling against my ear, close as breath. "Speak for them." I spun toward the angel. Its eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, fixed on me, waiting. I should have run. I should have refused. But deep inside, something told me the angel had already chosen me. Episode 4. The Woman in White Who Prays Backwards. Silence hung over the village like a shroud. Days passed and no one dared to enter the cemetery. Yet each night, I felt a pull, as if invisible hands were guiding me back to the grave. On the 7th night, I obeyed. The angel still stood there, frozen above the open pit, but I was not alone. At the far edge of the cemetery, a figure emerged from the mist. A woman draped in white, her veil dragging across the damp earth. Her face was hidden, but her lips moved, and when the words reached my ears, I froze. She was praying, but every syllable was backwards, each sound twisted inside out, as though Holy Scripture itself had been turned against its source. The angel bowed its head toward her, as if in reverence. I wanted to flee, but my feet anchored me in place. The woman's prayer grew louder, faster, her voice echoing like hundreds speaking at once. The soil of the grave quivered. Splinters of the coffin rose to the surface, rattling as though responding to her chant. Suddenly her head snapped toward me. Though her veil concealed her face, I felt her stare burn through me. My chest tightened, and in that crushing silence of the world, her voice entered me. Inside, not through ears, but through bone. "You were chosen to speak," she said, but the words came in reverse, sliding into meaning only when they pierced my skull. "You will carry the prayers they cannot." I shook my head, muttering that I wanted no part of this. But she raised her hand, pale and trembling, and pointed to the angel. It turned. For the first time since its arrival, the angel's body shifted. Not much, but enough to reveal its eyes. And I knew then it had been waiting for her. The woman's chanting reached a fever pitch. The grave itself began to sink, widening, swallowing grass and stone alike. I stumbled back, but the earth groaned, dragging me closer. And then, silence. Her prayer ended abruptly. The angel straightened, wings twitching like they were about to unfold. The woman in white lowered her veil. For the briefest moment, I saw her mouth. Not lips of flesh, but a gaping hollow, black and endless, shaped only to pray what no human tongue should. She vanished in the mist as quickly as she had come, but her last words still coil inside me, gnawing at my soul. "When the grave is ready, you will know." Episode 5. The Child Who Drew Wings in Blood. The village had fallen into a rhythm of terror. Days were for silence, nights were for waiting, watching the grave, the angel, the shifting shadows that no one dared to name. But it was a child who broke the stillness. His name was Mateo, barely 8 years old, pale, thin, with eyes too old for his face. His mother found him one morning crouched against the wall of their hut, finger pressed to stone. At first she thought he was doodling with mud, but when she drew closer, her breath caught. It was blood, his own. He had bitten his fingertip open and was using it as ink. And what he drew chilled her to her bones. Wings. Vast, jagged wings stretching across the wall, feathers sharp like blades. Not angelic in beauty, but monstrous. Heavy. Dripping. When asked why, Matteo only smiled. "He told me to," he whispered. His mother demanded to know who. The boy tilted his head toward the cemetery, though no one dared to speak the angel's name. Word spread fast. By dusk, half the village gathered to see the drawings. They multiplied, each more grotesque than the last. Wings sprouting from coffins, wings that crushed houses, wings wrapped around screaming faces. And always, at the center, a faceless figure standing at the grave. That night I went to Matteo myself. His hands were raw, stained crimson. He looked at me with a calmness no child should possess. "He wants to fly," Matteo murmured, voice trembling with delight. "But first he must remember how." I shuddered. "Who told you that?" "The angel." The boy pressed his bloody hand to the wall, dragging a feather across stone. "He said you will help him." My mouth dried. I tried to scold him, to pull him away, but the moment I touched him, something surged through me, heat like fire under my skin. I heard whispers, the same backwards chant the woman in white had spoken, curling inside my skull. Matteo giggled. "See, he talks to you too." That night I dreamt of wings, not of light, but of shadow. Wings that blotted out the sky, wings that scraped the ground until earth bled. And when I woke, my hands were stained red. Not with blood, I could explain. Episode 6. The midnight bell that rings without sound. The graveyard bell had not rung in years. Rust had swallowed its frame. Dust had claimed its rope. But on the 12th night after the angel appeared, it began to toll. We all heard it, or thought we did. The sound came not through the ears, but through the bones. A deep vibration, like thunder trapped inside the chest. Dogs whimpered and crawled under doorways. Infants stirred in their cribs, eyes wide though they made no sound. At the cemetery, the angel remained frozen, wings tucked, gaze locked on the grave. Yet every time the bell struck, its stone feathers trembled ever so slightly, as if each silent chime was loosening something bound within. The villagers gathered, clutching candles. Their flames flickered, though there was no wind. The priest, still voiceless, gestured wildly with his hands, trying to warn us. But no one could read his meaning. All we could do was count. 1 strike, 2, 3. By the 7th, the earth quivered. By the 9th, headstones rattled. By the 12th, the grave itself cracked open wider, coughing up soil as if the coffin inside were breathing. Then the bell fell silent, or so it seemed, because though no one else reacted, I still felt it. A 13th strike, low, distant, for me alone. I staggered back, clutching my skull. A whisper curled around the echo. "When the 13th rings, the door will open." I looked at the angel, praying it would deny it. Instead, its eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, like embers trapped in stone. It was listening to the same bell. That night, no one slept. Candles burned until they drowned in their own wax. Mothers rocked children whose lips moved in silent screams. And all the while, the grave waited, wider now, as though preparing to swallow more than one body. I know the others heard 12, but I cannot shake the 13th. It rings still, faintly beneath my heartbeat. And I fear the next time it tolls, it won't stop at 13. Episode 7. The angel turns his head. Until that night, the angel had been nothing but stone, still, silent, watching. We feared its presence, but at least we trusted its immobility. A horror that does not move is easier to endure. But everything changed on the night the angel turned its head. The 13th toll of the bells still echoed inside my chest when I returned to the cemetery. The grave yawned wider now, like a wound torn open. Mist crawled across the ground, thick as breath, and the angel stood above it all, wings folded tight. I told myself I would leave before midnight, that I would not look too long, but something in me wanted proof that the angel was not alive. The air grew heavy, pressing down on my lungs. The silence of the voiceless villagers followed me, their shadows stretched long in the moonlight. We gathered in trembling expectation, and then it happened. With a sound like stone grinding against bone, the angel's head shifted, slowly, painfully, turning away from the grave and toward the living. Its gaze swept over us like the blade of a scythe. The crowd gasped without sound. Mothers clutched children. Men fell to their knees. Every candle flickered and died at once, plunging the cemetery into a silver-blue darkness. The angel stopped. Its face locked on one man, Diego, the blacksmith. His hands shook as he tried to cross himself, but his lips could form no prayer. The angel tilted its head, studying him as though weighing the worth of his soul. And then Diego screamed. Not aloud, he had no voice, but in his body. He convulsed, eyes rolling back, veins bulging dark against his skin. He collapsed at the angel's feet, lifeless, his mouth frozen wide in a silent cry. The angel turned back to the grave, its head snapping into place as if it had never moved at all. We stood frozen, unable to flee, unable to breathe. The message was clear. The angel was not here for all of us. It was here for some, and it would choose. I looked down at Diego's body, his eyes glassy with terror. For the first time, I understood. The grave was not waiting for the dead. It was waiting for the living, and the angel was its herald. Episode 8. The Gospel Buried in Ashes. The morning after Diego's death, the villagers tried to bury him in holy ground, but when they lowered his body into the earth, the soil spat him back. The grave refused him. The angel had already claimed him. In desperation, they dug deeper, and that was when they found it. Beneath the grave, beneath the coffin that should have been sealed, they uncovered a book, charred, blackened, as though it had survived a fire that no one remembered. Its cover bore no title, only the imprint of wings scorched into the leather. The Gospel Buried in Ashes. The priest reached for it, but his hands trembled too much to hold it, so I picked it up. It burned cold in my grip, a paradox that sank into my skin. When I opened it, the pages bled gray dust into the air, and words shifted before my eyes, refusing to remain still. At first, the verses looked like scripture, prayers, psalms, fragments of holy text. But as I read, the letters twisted, reshaping themselves into names I recognized. Villagers, the living. Each page recorded a sin, a lie whispered in secret, a betrayal hidden for years, a desire never confessed aloud. The book knew them all. And at the bottom of every page, in crimson script, one word repeated, taken. The villagers begged me to stop reading, but I couldn't. The book held me. My lips moved against my will, speaking sins that had never been spoken aloud. Faces turned pale. Mothers pulled children close. Husbands glared at wives. The truth rotted the village faster than any plague could. Then, suddenly, the words shifted again. The ink bled together into a single line. When the last sin is spoken, the grave will close. I slammed the book shut, gasping for air. My hands were black with soot. My voice trembled, but it was not entirely my own. It carried an echo, as though the angel itself had spoken through me. The villagers fell to their knees, some in prayer, others in terror. The priest shook his head violently, trying to warn me, but he still had no voice. And then, the angel bowed. Its wings twitched, sending a shiver through the air. Not reverence, recognition. It knew I had read. It knew the book had chosen me. Episode 9. The Man Who Dared to Touch the Angel. Every soul in the village had learned one lesson. Do not approach the angel. To stand near it was to feel the air thicken, the blood in your veins slow, the weight of judgment pressing against your skin. But one man refused to believe. His name was Salvador, a drunk, a gambler, a man who laughed at fear. He mocked the silence that had gripped the village. He spat at the whispers of the gospel buried in ashes. And on the 14th night, with half the town watching in horror, Salvador stumbled toward the grave. The angel loomed above him, wings folded like stone knives. Salvador raised a trembling hand, a grin splitting his face. If this is God's messenger, he slurred, then let him strike me down himself. His fingers brushed the angel's wing. The scream that followed was not his voice. It was every voice the village had lost. 1,000 prayers torn from the throats of the mute, shrieking in one terrible chord. The sound split the air, rattled bones, shattered lanterns. Some fell to the ground clutching their ears, though no one else had a voice to cry out with. Salvador's body convulsed, his eyes rolled white, his veins darkened like rivers of ink spreading beneath his skin. His jaw stretched unnaturally wide, but the sound kept pouring out, not from his lungs but from the angel itself, using him as a hollow vessel. Then, just as suddenly, silence. He collapsed at the angel's feet. His chest still rose and fell, but his face was gone. Smooth, blank skin where eyes and mouth should be, as if his features had been erased. The villagers fled, stumbling into the night, but I could not move. My gaze stayed locked on the angel. Its head turned again, slow and deliberate, until its glowing eyes found mine. In that moment I knew Salvador had not been punished. He had been claimed, and worse, he was still alive. For I saw his fingers twitch against the soil, reaching upward like a man begging to be pulled from drowning. Episode 10. The grave opens for the living. Graves are meant for the dead. That truth had anchored us through generations, no matter what else we feared. But the night the grave opened for the living, even that certainty was taken from us. It began with a trembling beneath our feet, faint at first, like the earth was exhaling. The villagers huddled together, eyes locked on the angel. Its wings quivered, feathers grinding like stone on stone, and the soil at its feet began to sink. This time it was not the coffin rising, it was the earth itself yawning wider, swallowing roots, stones, and grass. The grave stretched like a mouth unhinging, deeper and deeper, until it gaped black, endless, waiting. We clutched one another, praying without sound, though our lips moved desperately. Then came the choice. The angel turned its gaze toward us. Its eyes burned brighter, and every head in the crowd snapped toward one man, Tomas, the baker. His face went pale as his wife clung to his arm, shaking her head in silent denial. But his feet betrayed him. Step by step, he walked forward, tears streaming down his cheeks as though pulled by invisible strings. He reached the edge of the grave. His body shook with resistance, every muscle straining against the force dragging him closer. His wife's hands clutched his sleeve, but the earth groaned, splitting wider, and with a final jerk he fell. Not into dirt, into blackness. No thud of impact, no cry of pain, just silence, swallowing him whole. The villagers collapsed in horror. Some tried to run, but the angel's head shifted again, freezing us in place. It was not random, it was choosing. The gospel buried in ashes burned in my hands, its pages twisting, revealing new lines that had not been there before. The grave is no longer for the dead. It hungers for the living, and it will not close until it is full. I felt my stomach twist as Tomas's wife wailed without sound, clawing at the ground where he had vanished. Her fingers came back black, covered in soot, and still the angel stood unmoving, guarding the abyss it had opened, its wings trembling as though ready to unfold. That night I realized, death was no longer the end, it was an invitation, and the angel had only begun to call the roll. Episode 11. The angel whispers the dead man's name. The grave had swallowed Tomas, but his absence was not the end, it was only the beginning. On the 17th night, when the mist curled thicker than ever and the moon vanished behind black clouds, the angel moved again. Not its wings, not its body, only its lips. At first I thought I imagined it, a flicker in the corner of my eye. But then I saw it clearly, the angel's mouth parting ever so slightly. And from that stony silence came a whisper. It was not a sound carried by air. It was a name pressed directly into the marrow of our bones, a name I knew well. Diego, the blacksmith who had fallen days earlier, stiff and lifeless at the angel's feet, the one we had left in the dirt, too afraid to bury. The moment the angel spoke his name, Diego's body twitched, his fingers clawed the soil. His chest heaved with a breath that should not have been possible. And then his eyes, glassy, pale, snapped open. The villagers scattered in terror, but no screams came, only the pitiful sight of mouths stretched wide in silence. Diego rose, stiff as wood, his skin gray, his mouth still frozen in that silent cry. He moved like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, and his gaze, if it could be called a gaze, locked on me. The gospel buried in ashes burned hotter in my hands. When I dared to look at its pages, I saw Diego's name written in blood-red ink. And beneath it, a line I had not seen before. Those whose names are spoken will rise, but not as they were. I tried to close the book, but my fingers would not obey. My own lips began to move, forming words that weren't mine. desperate syllables writhing on my tongue. The angel's eyes glowed brighter, commanding me, urging me to speak another name. I bit my tongue until I tasted iron. I forced the book shut, though the whispers gnawed at my mind. But I know this truth: the angel has found a new weapon. It does not need to strike. It does not need to touch. It only needs to whisper. And once it whispers your name, death is not your escape. It is your return. Episode 12. The Prophecy, Written in Shadows. After Diego rose, the village was never the same. No one slept. No one prayed aloud. We lived in terror of hearing our own names whispered in the night. But terror was not enough. The angel had more to reveal. It began with the shadows. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I noticed something strange on the gravestones. The shadows they cast were wrong, longer than they should be, bending toward the angel as though drawn to its presence. And then, on the stone cross above the open grave, the shadows began to write. Not carved, not painted, written in pure blackness, crawling across the surface like living ink. The villagers gathered, clutching each other as words took form. Crooked lines at first, then sentences jagged and sharp. When the final letters twisted into place, a message stared back at us. When the last name is spoken, the earth will be emptied, and the sky will burn. A prophecy, a warning, or a promise. The priest tried to shield the children's eyes, but the shadows kept moving, etching new lines across every surface they touched. On walls, on the ground, even on the trembling bodies of the villagers themselves. I watched as one man's chest darkened, words crawling across his skin, a confession of sins he had never spoken aloud. He clawed at his flesh, but the shadows would not leave him. The gospel buried in ashes throbbed in my hands, its pages turning without my command. And there, written in soot, I saw the same prophecy mirrored word for word, only this time beneath it, a final line appeared. The herald will speak the last name. I dropped the book, my heart hammering, because I knew the angel had chosen me. Every whisper, every vision, every page had been leading to this. The villagers backed away from me, their eyes wide with fear. They saw it too. I was no longer just a witness. I was a mouthpiece. And in the silence of the graveyard, the angel lifted its head fully for the first time. Its wings trembled, shadows spilling from them like ink across the stars. The prophecy was no longer written in stone. It was alive, and I was trapped inside it. Episode 13. The angel raises his wings. For weeks, the angel had stood in silence, wings folded like prison doors. We told ourselves it was only watching. We prayed it would never move again. But prayers are brittle things. On the 21st night, beneath a sky swollen with thunder, the angel raised its wings. The sound was not the rustle of feathers, but the shriek of stone grinding against stone. Each wing unfurled slowly, impossibly vast, blotting out the moonlight. With every inch they spread, the air grew heavier, pressing us into the ground as though the heavens themselves had collapsed upon us. A storm ignited without rain. Winds howled, yet no trees bent. Lightning flashed, yet no thunder followed. All of it was bound to the beating of those wings. The grave beneath them widened, splitting into cracks that spidered across the cemetery, swallowing earth and stone alike. I clutched the gospel buried in ashes to my chest, but it pulsed like a heart not my own. Its pages flew open against the wind, revealing new words I could not look away from. When the wings rise, the herald must speak. The villagers fell to their knees, hands over their ears, though no sound came. Their mouths opened in silent prayers, eyes streaming with terror. Yet amid the chaos, I heard it again, soft, steady, unyielding, the angel's whisper curling around my name. It was not a request, it was a command. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. No, I mouthed, but the book in my hands began to burn. Letters searing into my palms, names, sins, futures, all waiting to be spoken. And then the angel's wings beat once. The ground convulsed, graves shattered open, bones spilled like broken teeth across the soil. A gust of ash swept through us, choking, blinding, until the world itself seemed made of dust. When the wind cleared, I saw them, figures crawling from their graves, the once dead standing in rows, their faces blank as clay, their eyes locked only on me. They waited. The angel's wings stretched higher, its gaze piercing through the dark, and for the first time I realized it was not simply guarding the grave. It was preparing to release what lay beneath, and I was the key. Episode 14, The Grave That Became a Door. The grave was no longer a pit, it was a threshold. After the angel spread its wings, the earth beneath it tore apart, not downward, but inward, collapsing into a darkness that was not soil, not stone, not anything of this world. The villagers called it a void. I knew better. It was a door. From its depths came no smoke, no fire, but shadows, living, twisting shapes that slithered across the ground like serpents. They clung to tombstones, to walls, to the trembling legs of the living, pulling us closer with every passing breath. The angel stood tall above it, wings arched in triumph, as though it had been waiting centuries for this very moment. And all the while, the gospel buried in ashes writhed in my arms, its pages turning themselves. New words bled across the paper. The door will not open until the herald speaks. Speak, and the grave will give passage. My lips trembled. I could feel the weight of the names pressing at the back of my throat, desperate to escape. Each one burned against my tongue like embers. If I surrendered, if I spoke them, the door would open fully. And yet, it was already opening. The void widened with the sound like 1,000 voices gasping at once. I saw things beyond the threshold, silhouettes clawing against an unseen barrier, faces pressed against the darkness begging to be released. They were not the dead we buried. They were older, hungrier, forgotten by God. The villagers tried to run, but the ground betrayed them, splitting, dragging them back toward the abyss. Some clung to crosses, to trees, to one another, but the shadows pried their fingers loose, one by one. Silent mouths screamed as bodies slipped into the dark. The priest fell to his knees, tears streaking his face. He clutched my sleeve, eyes begging me not to obey the angel. Yet the angel's gaze seared into me, wings quivering with expectation. I realized then, this was never about death. The grave had always been a lock. The angel was not guarding it to keep us safe. It was guarding it until the day came for it to be opened. And now I was the key. The shadows hissed, the void widened, and I felt the first syllable claw its way up my throat. I swallowed it down, for now. But the angel's eyes told me the truth. I would not resist forever. The door was waiting, and soon I would speak. Episode 15. The Last Prayer Before Silence. The grave was no longer a wound. It was a mouth, open wide, waiting for me to speak the final word. The angel towered above it, wings stretched across the sky, blotting out stars, blotting out hope. Its gaze never left me. Its whisper coiled inside my skull. Relentless, patient, speak. Finish what has begun. The villagers gathered in the church for one last attempt. Their lips moved in silent prayer, though no voice remained among them. Their bodies trembled, their eyes pleaded, but all that rose was silence, an empty chorus falling flat against the walls of heaven. I stood in the doorway, clutching the gospel buried in ashes. Its pages bled ink across my hands, dripping like oil, words shifting, burning, demanding. Each name I had resisted, each secret it had recorded screamed at me to be released. And then the angel entered. Its wings folded just enough to pass through the door, yet even diminished, it filled the space like a storm. The air bent around it, heavy, suffocating. Candles extinguished, shadows swallowed the altar. And still the villagers prayed, their mouths stretching wider and wider, as though desperation alone could break the silence. The book burned in my arms. I felt the final name rising inside me, clawing up my throat. My body shook, my lips parted. But before I could speak, the priest, voiceless, broken, fell forward. On his knees, he pressed his forehead to the floor and clasped his hands together. No sound came, yet the weight of his prayer filled the room. A prayer of defiance, a prayer not in words but in surrender. And then the others followed. One by one, the villagers dropped to the ground, praying with their bodies, their tears, their silence. The church became an ocean of voiceless devotion. For the first time, the angel faltered. Its wings quivered, its head tilted, as though confused. The grave roared behind it, shadows writhing in rage. The final name pressed harder against my tongue, desperate to escape. But I did not speak. I dropped the book into the flames of the altar. It screamed without sound, pages twisting, ink boiling into black smoke. The angel let out a cry that shook the very walls, not a whisper, but a sound vast and terrible, the howl of something denied its harvest. The grave shuddered. The door began to close, swallowing its own shadows, sealing with a groan like thunder fading. And then, silence. The angel lowered its wings. It turned its gaze upon me, not in anger, but in promise. Its lips formed words I could not hear, yet I understood them all the same. This is not the end, only the pause. And in that final silence I knew the grave would wait, the angel would wait, and so would I.
Epilogue: The silence that waits. Months have passed since that night, yet the village has not healed. The graves are sealed, the church rebuilt, but the silence remains. No voice has returned. We live in a world without sound, where prayers are mouthed but never heard, where children laugh without echoes, where grief carries no cry. The angel is gone, or so we tell ourselves. It has not stood at the grave since the book was burned, yet its presence lingers like ash in the lungs. At dusk, the mist thickens, curling in shapes that look like wings. At midnight, the shadows bend toward the cemetery, as though bound to something still unseen. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, when I close my eyes, I hear it again, not with my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. The 13th toll, the whisper curling through the dark. It says my name. I do not know if I am cursed or chosen. Perhaps there is no difference. The villagers look at me with fear, for they know what I know. The angel has not abandoned us. It is waiting, watching, patient as stone. The grave was sealed. Yes, but doors can always be opened again. And when the angel returns, and it will, I fear it will not ask me to speak. It will command me. And this time, I may not have the strength to resist.